Crazy. Welcome to the Carnegie Town Hall. The meeting will begin in 30 seconds.
Come on.
Oh, tell me about it.
Okay, what do we got here? Workforce development. Here we go.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our City Council informational meeting. We are on Tuesday, January 6th, first meeting of 2015. Welcome to everybody in attendance or watching us on the internet or on CityLink. We appreciate your interest. We have a few items on our agenda today, but as usual, we will start with City Council open discussion. Councilors, anything? Councilor Staggers.
Yes, well, with the recent snowstorm, we've had a good opportunity to take a look at people's driveways, and hey, many people have some really nice driveways. The snow gates seem to be working very well. However, having said that, there has been some concern expressed by some people who apparently have not had their driveways having the snow gate being used. And I was just wondering if any of the other council members have heard of any stories about that.
I haven't. Nobody's talked to me individually. Has anybody else had anything? Councilor Erpenbach?
No, I haven't. I've heard tons of people telling me how great they are. You know, I know that there are a handful of folks that maybe are missing them, but if they call the city, very likely they'll come back. You know, we're always doing replows. If your street isn't plowed correctly, you know, you call the street department and they come back. So, I mean, you know, I have not heard anything, and I'm hearing only praises of the snow gates.
Yeah, so that's what they should probably do then, is just call Public Works if their driveway is not.
I would advise that because if it's problematic throughout the entire neighborhood, I know there was one circumstance on the southwest corner of town where it appears that the contractor wasn't using them as they were probably directed to, and that gave Public Works the opportunity to correct the problem if it's widespread, but if it's a sporadic thing. My own personal experience this morning is I asked my wife when she got up to look outside at 6 o'clock, and she said, yep, they came by and it looks pretty good. So, I mean, for the most part, it was done. So I appreciated that. Councilor Kiley?
Councilor Staggers, I had one individual call and contact me after the first event, and then we were in contact with Public Works, and I think, I believe that was resolved because I did not hear from them, and I know that Public Works was going to follow up with this particular party as well. And I have had the opportunity, the snow event following Christmas, I did have the opportunity to follow the plows around the city, and no, they did not make me run behind the plow or go the full 12-hour shift, as some of the councilors here had suggested I do. However, I did see the many challenges that the operators face as they're operating. I mean, you get one distraction. It could be a motorist who's not paying attention. I mean, obviously the operator has to initiate the gate on the plow. So if there's something else going on that demands his or her attention, it may not happen then. But I would just caution residents that it's going to reduce the amount of snow at the end of your driveway, but it is not going to eliminate it. So some might have the impression that it wasn't used because the snow still comes up over that gate. And especially the heavier the snowfall, the more that's going to occur. And it'll get to the point where they will not be able to use the snow gates if we get much more than 6 inches. So I guess maybe it could be an expectation issue too. Yeah. But again, a call back, contact Public Works, and I think they'll do a good job for them.
Councilor Rolfing?
I just wanted to comment that my neighborhood might have been one of those that never got, that the snow gates were not used because of the windrow at the end of the driveway in my situation in my house was as good as it's ever been. And so I think we may, if it was used, it did not do its job at all. Let's put it that way. So we'll go from there, and hopefully next time we'll get it done. It's already been plowed out, so I can't ask them to come back.
Yeah, I'm going to ask people to have a little bit of patience.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of these are contractors using their snow plows. They've used them twice. Sometimes maybe it's just their first time using them. So there's definitely going to be a learning curve. But we do need input back from the people. So call Public Works, I guess, would be my advice on the first place to call, and let them know so that if there is more of a widespread problem that they can address it. So any other comments on snow gates? And you know, on a positive note, I saw on Facebook a posting yesterday. A citizen got a letter from Dean Borchert with Public Works that acknowledged that they had missed cleaning his cul-de-sac, I guess, and that they apologized for it. And you know, it said that if it happens again, and there's a lot of I mean, they showed a picture of this letter from Public Works on Facebook, and people, you know, we're just impressed that our Public Works Department would take the time to acknowledge that there was a problem and address it and fix it and move forward. And that's what we have to do, stay positive and give them a chance to make it right. So.
And I might add that cul-de-sacs especially present an extreme challenge for the plows under any condition, but especially with the snow gates. Because the driveways are so close together, there's not any room to dump that snow or to release the snow. So it's there again, I guess they do need to have their patience and contact Public Works if they feel that there's a bigger issue that needs to be addressed.
Other public, I'm sorry, not public, open discussion items. I have a couple. Councilor Jameson, did you want to go first? No? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I would just make an announcement that we have a fiscal committee meeting next after this meeting. We're going to talk about the SRF loans that we approved some time ago, but it's kind of a in-depth update from our Cotter, so look forward to that. Perfect.
Fiscal committee meeting immediately following this one. I do have a couple of things. I attended the county commission meeting this morning. What I learned there is county commission did a proclamation appreciating law enforcement. Friday is National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. So we owe a debt of gratitude to our law enforcement, city police, Highway Patrol, sheriff's deputies, our wardens. So hug a cop day on Friday, or at least show them your appreciation. So, and then next Tuesday, we have a somewhat unique meeting. We are going to have a joint meeting with the Minnehaha and Lincoln County Commission, and the Dakota Access Pipeline group will be here to do an informational type of presentation. And in the interest of giving everybody equal access to all of us, all three elected bodies or officials, we will take public input and comment at that time, so it's not just a one-sided presentation. So be prepared for that, but also I know there's a lot of interest, and I know that there are people saying I'm going to attend every meeting that involves this. The public really will have their opportunity for a public hearing that the Public Utilities Commission is putting on at the Best Western Ramcota Hotel on Thursday, January 22nd at 5:30. So the public will have a lot of opportunity. The PUC does get first crack at this, but the Dakota Access Pipeline Group does want to come to the joint meeting and present their item. Councilor Urbanbach?
I just wanted to make sure that the public understands we don't have any influence over that as elected officials in the local jurisdictions. We have absolutely no influence over that. We are going to do our best in terms of getting the message out to the PUC as a body, as the three bodies together, but it is the PUC that's going to make the final decision on that thing.
Correct. All righty. No other City Council open discussion? We will move on to our first presentation, our only presentation actually, Workforce Development Pilot Project Update, and Mr. Smith, welcome.
Good afternoon. Let's see if we can make this presentation appear on your screen. Ah, there it is. Thank you. Well, again, good afternoon. Darren Smith, Director of Community Development. This is a very brief presentation. In fact, I suspect maybe the Q&A and the back and forth might be the lion's share of our discussion, and I think that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in. I think all of you know, as I try to move ahead with this. Oh, it's a new clicker. Okay, sorry about that. Well, I think as you know, back in September when you were considering and approving the 2015 budget for the city, there was an amendment late in that process by Councilor Urbanbach to provide $500,000 to address the workforce development issues, workforce challenges in the community. And as I recall from the conversation with her at the time, I don't want to speak for her, but it appeared, you know, a lot of conversations she was having with businesses and others. Every time you turned around, it seemed like this issue was coming up. And of course, that was not news at all to me, or probably a lot of others in the community. You know, I would go as far as to say, if you talk to Slater and the folks at the Development Foundation, anybody in our office, the mayor, a number of others, anybody who really engages on any basis or on any level, on a regular basis in economic development or business expansion or whatever, you're going to hear probably the biggest challenge they have is workforce development. Who are they going to hire? Getting enough people. Sometimes it's not even the number of people, it's the abilities, the skill set for exactly what they need and so forth. So I'd go as far as to say, I think it is our top challenge right now in economic development, and I think it has been for some time. And I also think there's a greater recognition of that with others, such as Forward Sioux Falls Development Foundation and others, and you'll, I think, start to see a greater focus in the future on that as well. But back to the city program. So the city council approved $500,000 to address workforce development in what I feel was a pilot project manner, and that's what we're here to talk about today. As I recall from that meeting, there were a few other takeaways, and I put those in bullet points here. The message, I think, was pretty clear that to address workforce development in a variety of ways, address those challenges in a variety of ways in the community with a number of others who would become partners, essentially, in the effort, to have the program in place as early in 2015 as possible, to coincide as closely as possible to when the dollars would be effective, which technically was January 1st, and that you also wanted to see the dollars put out and put to good use as early as possible in 2015 as well. I think largely to tie in with the last bullet point, which is to be in position to evaluate the program prior to the approval of the 2016 budget. So getting the dollars out there, put to good use, measure the progress, the success and so forth, so you can make educated decisions on what that means for 2016 and beyond. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that, those expectations, and the challenges with that as well. And then the last point up here I would touch on, it's the second to last bullet point, is the city council updates. To me, that was the other takeaway from that night in September, which is come back and tell us, in late 2014 or early 2015, tell us what you have in mind for this program, what it's going to look like, how you think these dollars might be put to use, and then keep you updated along the way as well. So that's a little bit of the background. So really what we did at that point, and when I say we, is largely Brent O'Neill and myself, we met and had a discussion as a staff, the economic development team, about this opportunity, gearing up, getting ready for it, being prepared, being ready in early 2015 here so we could get running with it. And we really felt like we knew there's a need out there, but what exactly does that mean? How big of a need is it? Is it real? Is it maybe more anecdotal? Is it more limited in some ways? And then exactly how could we fill a role or play a role and fill a gap and help with this? So after we had the conversation, the first thing we decided was we really need to meet and talk to as many businesses and others in the community that are experiencing these challenges, and just point blank ask them, are you experiencing challenges with your workforce? What kind of challenges? What have you tried? What have you not tried? Why did you try certain things? Why didn't you try others? What was successful? What failed? And if the city had a program and we could make dollars available to support efforts, how would you see those dollars being put best to use for your business, your industry, the community, and addressing this issue? And point blank, would you apply for dollars if such a program existed? Would you apply? How many dollars? What would that level of funding be that you would likely ask for, and how would you put those dollars to use? And we just, we posed those questions, and then we did a lot of listening and took notes and tried to comprehend what they were telling us. We ended up having about 20 meetings with, I would say, somewhere in the range of 30 to 40 people collectively. We identified about 10, maybe 12, organizations that we thought immediately in a variety of different industries could give us good feedback, and we scheduled meetings with them. We ended up getting to around 20 meetings because I would say about half of our meetings, or somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10, were actually unsolicited on our part. They reached out to us and said, hey, we heard about this. We heard about what the council did, or we heard you've been meeting with people on this issue. Boy, we have needs. Could we come talk to you and offer our ideas? And so we accepted, I think we accepted pretty much every invitation to meet with folks and talk to them. And so those meetings took place. It'd be with folks in the following areas: education. We met with the public school system. We met with Southeast Tech. We met with University Center. We met with Globe University. So wide spectrum of the different educational institutions that we have here in Sioux Falls. We met with a number of businesses, both for-profit and nonprofit. Also some nonprofit organizations. I wouldn't characterize necessarily as businesses, but nonprofit entities that have a mission of one kind or another. We also met with member associations. So for example, the Home Builders Association, the Associated General Contractors, which would be the commercial builders, commercial buildings, streets, highways, interstates, that type of thing. So we met with associations that represent a number of businesses and entire industries. And then we met with others that maybe wouldn't fall in one of those 4 categories. And the clear takeaway after all of those meetings, most of them in October, November, and a few in December, is that without question it confirmed there's a huge need in Sioux Falls in that workforce area. And again, I don't think that'll surprise anybody. We've seen what the state has been attempting to do the last couple years, and now they have a new initiative that's come out that I know you're all aware of. So, I mean, from the governor and the state on down at the local level, we all recognize there's a significant issue in South Dakota and Sioux Falls, and I think the issue in Sioux Falls is even a little different probably than that across the state. So, to try and categorize, well, where are these, what does that mean? What primary areas would these needs be in? How would you categorize that? And this will go to the heart a little bit of the next slide where we talk about what the program, what we would like to see the program look like. And with an application-based program, what areas that we would likely approve for funding and support. And this is what we've come up with. We feel like most, if not all, of the needs fit or fall into one of these four broad categories. Strategic planning and implementation. And just to expand on that a little further, what that means is really community planning. I think it's planning for some industries. It's planning for individual businesses. That came up more than once. Does the community have a plan? Before we talk about our individual needs, sometimes the businesses or others would say, well, does a community have a plan? What's the community's plan? What's the strategy? Some industries, like I said, the construction industry and others, talked about, boy, we really, we have a lot of things that we'd like to try, a lot of things we think would work, but, we probably also need a plan. So planning and strategic planning and implementation is one of those categories that we heard about, and I would see some need coming forward in. The next one, attracting and recruiting new employees. So again, this one is pretty straightforward. Those businesses that are out there, and I mean, it's everything from high tech to low tech and everything in between. Sometimes very advanced degree jobs, six-figure salaries are approaching that, and something on the other end of the spectrum as well. But a lot of businesses that are looking for ways to somehow attract and recruit new employees to their business, and sometimes those folks largely have to come from other parts of the country, or they're finding that that's where that they're having success getting them. But it's still a tremendous challenge. It's very expensive. The next category is, I would say, one that I'm becoming more and more interested in. I think we have a lot of opportunity, and that is training and reemployment. I think oftentimes, historically and even today, a lot of people tend to focus on the workforce development issue, and the workforce challenge is, well, we need more people here. We need to somehow bring people in. We need more bodies. And some of the folks we met with, I thought, made some very good points where they said, maybe we do need to attract and recruit some new people, but there's actually a lot of people here. We're adding 3,000 to 4,000 people a year to our population, and that's helping. But one of them pointed out, one of the meetings, it was pointed out in I think it was in November, there were approximately 2,300 jobs available in the community according to the Department of Labor and other resources, and yet about 3,800 people had applied for unemployment benefits. Now, are a certain percent of them, is it fair to say a certain percent of them maybe truly aren't looking or aren't looking very hard? That's probably fair to say. But even if it's 10 or 20%, when you do the math, you could make the argument that there's a lot of people who are already here that aren't getting connected to those open jobs for one reason or another. And again, what we heard a lot about is from some organizations that work specifically with those populations where they're trying to provide skills and education and reemployment, they just don't have the skills. They don't have the skill set for the certain type of job. So you may have somebody looking for a job, you may have somebody who has a job to offer, it's still not a match because they're missing some skills or some type of education or whatever. So we heard that quite a bit, actually, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of organizations in the community, including nonprofits, that have programs already. But what they're lacking is funding to do something about those programs, to have them more widespread, or to be able to do them on a consistent, regular basis, to be able to market, to get people into those programs. So there's opportunities there. Lastly, education-related support. Again, I don't think this will surprise anybody. I already mentioned the different educational institutions we met with, and each of them at every level had lots of ideas on how they would put, if they had more dollars at their disposal, how they would put those to use. It was everything from career camps, internships, startup programs that are specifically requested by industries who have jobs to fill and need to fill immediately and long-term. Scholarships was another one for specific programs In fact, a conversation with Jeff Holcomb at Southeast Tech, he talked about some scholarship programs they've had in the past, tuition forgiveness and those types of things that were very successful, but they ran out of dollars. They have industries that come to them and say, we have a specific need. We need you to produce X number of these types of folks in this program to help fill jobs. But there's a financial challenge for them. At the end of the day, even the schools, like a Southeast Tech, they're a business. At the end of the day, they're a business. The students are customers, and so they have to be attracted, and it has to make sense. Those have to be good business decisions for the school as well. And so he felt like there was a lot of opportunity there that a program like this could assist with. So what does the program look like? Well, this is what we would propose. The program would be, application-based, be an application program, application-based program. We would want to make it as simple and straightforward and broad as possible. Yet, of course, there would have to be some parameters and criteria and so forth. But I just can't stress enough, when you have a pilot program, to me, that term, pilot program, inherently means you don't have all the answers. If you had all the answers, it wouldn't be a pilot program or a pilot project, it'd just be a program. So we're learning as we go through this, and I know something that myself and our office has learned with, redevelopment RFPs and those types of processes previously is the more you tighten the screws on these processes and put a bunch of rules in place and determine in advance what the good ideas and bad ideas are, usually it doesn't lead to good things. And there are good ideas you can't think of in advance, and they walk in the door, and then you can't say yes because you've already got rules in place that prohibit it, those types of things. So we'd like to keep it broad and flexible. We would have a review committee that would be in place to consider these. What we have in mind would be obviously based on our economic development office, myself, Brent O'Neill, our economic development manager. We have a new economic development coordinator who will be coming on very soon, and part of their responsibilities, as we've said before, will be this issue of workforce development and working with other partners in the community. We would likely tap somebody in our human resources office. That makes a lot of sense because when you talk to businesses, again, nonprofits, whoever it is out there, oftentimes HR people are on the front lines of the workforce issue with recruiting, attracting, retaining, reemployment, whatever it is, and even education. So someone from HR, and then also somebody from the city attorney's office. Because with the applications that come in from the different sources we talked about, and there will be others I'm sure as well, these are public dollars. So we need to be cognizant of that in the ways that are appropriate versus some that may not be a good fit for a public program to fund. So that would likely constitute the committee that would consider the applications. We'd like to launch by mid-January. Again, I felt like the direction was, hey, the dollars are available, the issue is there, it's not going away, let's get going. So I feel like we're ready for that. We really just need to finalize the application, put the finishing touches on it, get all those details nailed down. I don't think we're too far away from that. And we could launch this very, very soon. The dollars would likely, there wouldn't be a deadline. Again, the dollars would be made available. Applications would be sought, they would come in, we would consider them as they come in, review them, approve, deny, whatever the case may be. And then the funding awards would be made. And this is probably a little conservative, but the last bullet point there, provided we get started very soon, I think the initial funding awards could be made, and those funds could be in the hands of those who would use them as early as, I would say early to mid-March. And then the applications can continue coming in, either until the dollars are gone or until we no longer have applications that we feel are worthy, that we would support. Those 4 categories I talked about earlier, We would intend for those to be in the application to give some direction. Again, they're pretty broad, but to give some direction as far as the categories that we would likely approve. And then again, just, some basic criteria that we've talked about. That'd be pretty straightforward. Questions?
Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. Thanks, Darren. This is a pretty interesting process that you've gone through, and I appreciate all the meetings, and I'm surprised at the number of folks that are interested, and I have yet another thing in the mailbox, from folks that are like, hey, we want in.
Yeah.
So it's, as you said, it is a need that we're all well aware of, and I appreciate you being willing to jump into this. Just one comment before the conversation kind of starts is that, we always talk about how slowly government works. And it does that for a reason, because government is about serving the people. And we want to take the kind of input and have the kinds of conversations that are important to participatory government. On the other hand, government also needs to be ready to jump in when things need to be done. And this is one of those times when we have a need that's so dramatic that we really need to be willing to take the risk. And I just applaud this council for approving that part of the budget, that this $500,000, and to approve that idea that it is a pilot. We're testing this. And you know what? If it doesn't work, we toss it out and do something different. And so I think that's the bottom line here, is that we really have to start to understand that government can make a difference in issues like this, and that we should move forward with this. And so I'm excited to hear how we move.
Councilor Staggers.
Yeah, Darren, workforce development programs have been around for a very long time. How many workforce development programs do we have in Sioux Falls?
Oh boy, it'd really be impossible to put a number on the number of workforce development programs, and I think it would depend on how you define that. I'm not sure there's a good answer for that question.
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned if we don't know how many workforce development programs there are in Sioux Falls, and then we're just saying, hey, come and apply for part of the $500,000. I mean, what's this going to do, really? It's that, we're going to have some businesses getting some money to help the bottom line.
No, I really don't. I understand the question. I don't really see the connection, though, that leap that, between those two things. The way this is going to work is, again, you're going to have businesses, you're going to have nonprofit entities and others with programs that will come forward. You're going to have educational institutions that come forward. There's going to be, I'll be honest, I couldn't begin to speculate how much of the $500,000 will be used. I do know this: we're going to have a lot of applications. I think a lot of them are going to be smaller dollar amounts. That's my gut feeling after having approximately 20 meetings with different groups across the board. But it's going to be in a variety of categories. And what I would ask for is, it's been approved in the budget, it's been appropriated, the dollars are available. Judge us after a few months with this. Again, being very candid, when we had the first conversation and even when it was approved, between the first conversation and when it was approved, I wasn't sure exactly what this would mean. And it's a big issue to get your arms around. But the more we thought about it, and then the more we had these meetings, to me it's becoming much more clear that there's a lot of need out there, and it's in a variety of ways. And I think we're going to do a lot of good with this program. I don't know if this program should continue in 2016 and beyond as a city program, but I think we're going to do a lot of good things with this. We're going to learn a lot. I also know that workforce development is going to be a top, if not the top priority for the next Forward Sioux Falls campaign. And it's a top priority going forward for the Development Foundation, and they're engaged right now in launching a planning process that I think we're going to be a part of. And so I think that effort is going to learn a lot from our effort as well. And we're all in this, we're all in this together, so I think that's good.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Forward Sioux Falls and workforce development. Hey, I think that's fantastic they're doing that. But we don't have any real background as a city government itself, and all we're going to be doing, it looks like to me, is just giving out grants, giving out money for private businesses to come up with something that they call workforce development. I mean, this kind of reminds me of the facade easement program. You know, people apply for $100,000 or so, and we give them $100,000, and they go off their merry way.
Well, I wouldn't agree with that characterization, and I guess I would just say whether it's, you know, private, for-profit businesses, nonprofit schools, whatever, you know, you're talking about the backbone of our community, the backbone of our economy, and Sioux Falls has a lot of things going for it. We are very, very appealing to a lot of people. You know, there are some cities that are losing 3,000 to 4,000 people a year. We're gaining 3,000 to 4,000 for a reason. We haven't been getting lucky since the 1990s. We have a great community. We have something to offer. And I can tell you firsthand, we're becoming more and more appealing to businesses that want to move here and do business for a lot of reasons. And this is always their chief concern, workforce. It is.
Riley?
Well, I do agree that we have had other workforce development programs out there historically. I mean, the Home Builders Association has had their Tools for Schools program, which is a workforce development. First Premier Bank has had their internships, which more times than not leads to full-time employment. That's workforce development. I think the difference here in the past year, especially with the focus on the state level and the Sioux Falls community level now, is that it is a more widespread, comprehensive effort here to focus on the issue. And we're trying to bring education and the private businesses and the not-for-profit organizations and the other member associations all together to collaborate and focus on this so that we could have a greater impact. Yeah. So I think that's what I see as a difference here compared to what each entity has done on their own. And I'm hopeful that if we all collaborate and work together, that we're going to have a greater impact on resolving this issue, which leads to some of my questions. When you mentioned education as one of the involved parties here, is it safe to assume that we're talking the colleges and the universities, the tech schools, as well as the secondary education, the high schools?
All of them.
Great.
Yeah.
And then to what degree have we worked with the state with what we're trying to do here too?
Well, we met with the state as well, met with GOED. And again, when we set out to meet with groups, you know, I should also mention, just like you would use a focus group, you know, we couldn't meet with everybody, but we tried to pick groups in different categories, whether it be, you know, again, public, private, for-profit, nonprofit, education, something other than those. So we met with a sample in each. With education, we did happen to meet with all of them. There's a great deal of interest from them, so some were solicited by us and others, the request came from them. But no, we work very closely with the state, and I think the program they have is going to do great things. And what they're going to do with scholarships in particular, you know, we still need to see what all those details are, and I think they're working on those, and they'll know those soon. You know, that may take some of the burden or the pressure off of what this might have done with those in particular, but it's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna remove, there's still more that can be done. You know, when you look at that program and $50 million, you know, it's a big number, but then you break that down further, and I think it's something like 300 scholarships or something to that effect the first year, the first few years, and then I think a smaller number after that. So I mean, even with that big number of money, it equates that number of scholarships, and I think there's an even bigger need than that. I think those programs are one that I'd put in the top 5 or 10. I think we have a lot of opportunity in that area, and it's proven. That isn't in theory. I mean, talk to Jeff Holcomb. He'd be happy to come and talk to you and talk about the scholarship programs they've had and the young people that have come in, and then they have to make a commitment to work in that industry in our community for a period of time, or they have to pay it back. And that's a contract that they are legally bound by and obligated to.
And I know that you mentioned that the schools, whether it's university or the Southeast Technical Institute. I mean, they still have to conduct themselves as a business, and they need to make sure that they're filling classes. And starting new programs especially is difficult to start out. Has there ever been any discussion, and is there any limitation in terms of the ability to help support instructor salaries and go in as a partnership? A 50-50, so that there's an equal commitment to help them at least get off the ground and use it as seed money for a period of time until the program has become established.
Absolutely.
And become self-supported.
Yeah. Again, what we expect are proposals to come forward and request, maybe establishing a program. One potentially related example, and it's hypothetical, could be something construction industry training related, where you maybe have somebody, an instructor at Southeast Tech or Mitchell Tech or something to that effect, and there's a need to do the training here in Sioux Falls, but the instructor is at Mitchell Tech, and Southeast Tech, because of the way they're structured at the state level, can't offer it here, but that person could come over and do the training here, maybe through the school or maybe even privately, contracting with the home builders or the commercial construction industry. They could do that. And that's a program that could be put together that I could see this assisting with, and we've had some of those conversations.
Great. Well, thanks for your effort, because I do believe that this is probably one of the #1 issues that we face as a community, and it's just not going to go away. It's going to take some effort on our part as city government, as well as private businesses and the educational systems and the other organizations that are out there.
Councilor Rolfing?
Thank you. Couple of questions, Darren. When this went through, I was concerned, and I don't know if I need to be, but I continue to be worried a little bit about coordination with other programs as we talked. Have you worked with, and as part of the strategic planning implementation type thing with the development office, and also you did mention that you've worked with the state of South Dakota. I just don't want to see us, the development office going this direction, and you're going this direction, where maybe you should be going this direction, they should be going this direction to complement each other. Yeah.
Well, the short answer is yes. Good. And if I can maybe take the opportunity, even go a step further, and just be very candid. I know that issue, even on some level, has been out there for a while, that, even when we created the Economic Development Office or Division in the city, and I guess all I can tell you is we, the three entities, and us and the Development Foundation together, we work so closely together. Could communication be better at times between us? Of course. That happens in partnerships. But rest assured, we work very closely. I think there's very little we do that they're not aware of, and very little they do that we're not aware of. And so we work very, very closely.
One more.
I have one more, Darren, on your review committee. I noticed that you did not mention the business community in that. Is there a reason, or did you?
Yes, it was intentional, and here's why. Because as we thought about that, actually the first thought was to do that. But then we thought, well, now wait a second. We got to try and think now, who could come in and apply for these dollars, and what connections might they have? And it became more and more clear to us that we felt the safest approach was to not do that, because there's a likelihood you could have somebody with an organization, makes a lot of sense, knows a lot about workforce, or is in an HR office somewhere, but then their business might want to come in, or somebody, an organization related to theirs, or something like that. It became more clear, we met with SHRM, the Sioux Empire Human Resource Management Association. They represent a lot of HR people, so that's another member-based association. And we met with them, and that's a volunteer-based entity or organization with lots of members. But, we had in front of us 3 people from 3 different organizations who work on workforce development. And when we met with them, even though they were there for the association, they were also asking us questions about, well, we'll probably come back as an organization, a separate organization. And so we just felt like, why run the risk of that, having that potential conflict of interest? And, it's a pilot project, and it's the first time, and we're going to learn.
I understand. I'm just looking at buy-in.
Absolutely.
Councilor,
Yep.
Councilor Jameson?
Thank you, Darren. When this was approved in the budget, there were some of us who were a little frustrated without having a plan in place, but approving the 500,000.
Yep.
I'm glad you're on to creating a plan.
Yeah.
So I assume that when you met with the Development Foundation and the state, you probably figured out the gap, what they're missing, what we can go after.
Yeah.
And could you articulate that
Yeah.
just a little better for me?
Yep, I would probably address that in two ways. First of all, what we had, I think all of us had agreed on previously, but there had not been action taken on, and that's going to change too very soon, is a community planning effort. So I think that's been out there a little bit already, and I don't think it's a secret on their part, and it's coming. Forward Sioux Falls and the Development Foundation are going to launch soon a community-wide comprehensive planning effort that they want us to be a part of in a lot of different ways. I think it's something we told them immediately, hey, we felt for a long time our community we have a need for something like that. And we have this program too. And I'd also combine it even before the state's big announcement with Denny Sanford and the scholarship dollars. They had announced previously, earlier this year, the governor's own workforce development effort where he was going to make dollars available to communities, but it had to be matching dollars. So you had to show that you had local buy-in locally, local government, local development foundations and so forth. And so we said, hey, the stars are aligning here. We've got a city program now. We've got a state program, albeit they might each be one time, but we have those in place and a recognition that we need a plan, a strategic plan and implementation. And so we're right away on the same page with that, and you're going to see that moving forward, and I hope that's something that this program can support as well. And then secondly, I would just say that I think the Development Foundation and Forward Sioux Falls to some extent I think they've approached workforce development in some ways and in some ways kind of nibbled around the edges. It's such a big issue to get your arms around. And I think they would acknowledge that as well. I think they've heard that from members and investors. And so some of the things that we're going to have the ability to try and ironically move quicker on are some of the things that we're going to find that come in for applications that we'll be able to fund on a small scale with education, with nonprofit programs, with small businesses, with large businesses. I think they're actually really eager to see what comes out of this and how that influences the planning process that we'll be undertaking with them over the next year.
So if I heard you right, I think I did it, but correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but being the fact that we are the city and that maybe we could react in a little faster, a little more nimble way, I see that as an advantage as well.
Yeah.
We should really take care of that and hone in on that speediness that we have the opportunity to do. The state, God bless them, the Development Foundation, God bless them too.
Yep.
But given our role and your role, I think if you could work on that element
Absolutely.
and
Yep.
get right back to it versus a long, drawn-out process.
Yep.
And then as well, I think, we talked a little bit about spending this money, and you talked about judging the program at a later date. I would urge you at least to develop a fine program and get some quality work done versus spending the money.
Yeah.
It's not about spending the money just to spend it. Know that.
Absolutely.
I won't judge you that way. I'll
Yep.
judge you on a quality program. and its
Absolutely.
fundamentals. Okay.
Well, and thank you for saying that. And that combined with something Councilor Kiley said earlier, I just wanted to come back to. The other thing that we learned throughout this that kind of happened organically in the process was we saw multiple opportunities where we were connecting groups that really had nothing to do with money. We were connecting businesses with programs, or I won't name individual schools or businesses, but we were connecting some schools with businesses and nonprofit programs where they should have been talking. They didn't even know they were doing it until we started having these conversations. And I think in some cases they will come in and say, hey, it is a good idea that we get together. We're going to apply for some dollars to do a program. So we may ultimately support that. But in some cases, we were just connecting people that had nothing to do with money before we even talked about money. So we will. And we're committed to keeping the council informed too. So if we can just nail down the details on the application and get this thing launched, and if we stick to this timeline, I think in the next few months, we'll be back here and we would like to provide regular updates because this is, this is new for us too, and do that in some manner.
Councilor Anderson.
As Councilor Kiley pointed out, you're looking at a lot of different groups that you're working with.
Yeah.
A few months before we voted on this, I actually had some meetings with some of the staff at the VOTEC and talked about a program there. It was a heavy equipment class that they had operated for years and ran out of funding. And that class actually just moved across the border, and a community college in Iowa took it over and is doing that training. We don't get those people back. South Dakota has always been known as or known for being a low-income state. These type of programs are going to help re-educate people so that we have a quality educated workforce to attract businesses that are going to pay more. And that will help the entire community. So when I voted for this and when Councilor Urfenbach brought it to me, that was the kind of things I first thought of. And actually after we voted on this, a couple days later, I met with Pam Holman and her staff and made them aware of this fund and my hopes for what could happen through this. And everything that you're talking about is what I was thinking also, is that we can bring together different entities within the community to either enhance programs that we already have or create or reestablish programs that are needed.
That's right.
With the state program, one of the things they said was that they wanted to identify those critical needs. And, working in the private sector, each and every one of us sees our businesses needing educated workforce. So I feel that we are on the right path. Sometimes you can't have a solid plan put together for something. You have to, encourage those things to happen. And I feel that this money will help do that. And I'm very supportive of what we're doing up to this point. Thank you.
Councilor Erickson.
Thank you. I just have a few, maybe a little bit more specific questions. On the background slide, you talked about the evaluating of the program. My question is, and just to be straightforward, I voted for this, I support it, I think it's a critical need in our community. But like I said, just have a couple pointed questions.
Sure.
What's considered, what do you plan on measuring and what's considered successful? I know that's a pretty big question. However, I think it's important that we know if we're spending this money, how is it deemed a success by?
Yeah, no, great question. And that actually was a conversation, and Brent is probably behind me nodding, I'm guessing right now. That was a conversation we had a number of times of, hey, if the expectation is not only do we want to know, if any or all of our programs are successful, but the council, I thought, made it clear that night is we want to know before we have to make decisions in 2016 what should become the fate of this type of program and funding for this type of effort. So we talked a lot about that, and I'm just looking real quick. We had kind of put a draft together of what the application would look like. So I'm looking for the language because I can tell you it is already in there. It will be in the final version. That any proposal or application has to demonstrate how they will measure progress, success, or lack thereof. Now, each application is going to be different and unique, so those measurables will be different. But when an application comes in, we would review it. Before we would approve it, we'll require them to come in and spend some time with us, make sure we're on the same page with what exactly they're proposing to do, the expectations are there, and then we will have to enter into an agreement with them anytime funding is involved. And in that agreement will be those things that they'll tell us they have to do to receive the funding. And there will be measurables in there so we can measure success or lack thereof.
Okay. Other question I had was, during your meeting times, what shortages were identified specifically for Sioux Falls? I don't know if it was welders, nursing, clerical staff. What area are you really finding that Sioux Falls is missing? I know the heavy equipment is a big deal when we lost that to a bordering state because you don't get those people back.
Yep.
But what are we really trying to reach out towards? I mean, what do we need in our community?
Well, there were quite a few. Trying to think on some that jumped out. One was manufacturing related that Jeff Holcomb talked about that was very successful for a few years until they ran out of funding. I think it was a mechatronics program. Construction, huge need in construction, both home building and commercial. Plumbing, I think, was another one that came up through one of the technical schools. One of the large for-profit businesses, I remember being a little surprised by this. He said, yeah, we're out there recruiting and trying to attract management folks at this level. But he said, the reality is if I had to pick one that was the biggest challenge, it's the under $20 an hour category. So he said, it's not the, $75,000 or $100,000 a year. It's that. But by far and away, the bigger challenge is the under $20 and how they're competing with a lot of other businesses in town for those. So those are some that immediately come to mind. There was, one high-tech, what I consider high-tech business, and, they've got some specific programs they've had success with recruiting, very bright people that, write software and programming and those types of things. That their challenge is recruiting them to come here. They can't find enough of them here. And that's a big deal because they're already talking about, they may have to have satellite offices in Minneapolis and Omaha, and they don't want to. They want to employ everybody here if they can, but they may be forced to because they're having a hard time finding, and they'd like to see more young people graduating from those programs.
Right. Last two small questions that I have. With the application process and the review committee, who is approving the applications? Is that strictly in your department? And then as far as the review committee, is that also in your, or is there any public people on the committee or application review process?
Good question, and I'll probably repeat a little bit of the answer with Councilor Rolfing. When we contemplated that, I guess the way we saw it immediately, like a lot of programs, council provides funding, administratively then, the staff, we execute that and do that. And so we thought about it this way, but then we thought about having a business or somebody, a public person, even, thought about a council member. But what we, maybe you'll disagree, but what we came back to was we just felt the safest, cleanest approach was to make it a staff-driven program, like pretty much, everything else we do, but a recognition that we did want that HR expertise and influence that we have in-house, and also we wanted somebody from the city attorney's office because, this is a new area for us.
Thank you for answering my questions, and I think this is a great program to start here locally.
Yeah.
We've talked about the state program at the $50 million, and that is exactly a huge amount, but it's for the whole state.
Correct.
This is what we can gear specifically for our community, specifically for what we need for education purposes, or if it's business related, or whatever it might be. And so this is our chance to really make a difference here in our community, which in turn comes back dollars, sales tax dollars, property
Yeah.
tax, you name it. I mean, it just kind of trickles down. And it's hard to
Yep.
measure that
Yep.
when you hire a new person that went through a program. But we all kind of know what it means when we have a, you know, a citizen that is in good standing, paying, shopping,
Yeah,
doing what they need to do. So,
that's
thank
right.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Counselor Erpenbach.
Just one comment to add to that. Remember, council will approve these
Oh, yeah.
as contracts, so council has final say over where this money goes. So, you know, it comes down to, we did talk at length about putting a council member on it, and I went, you know what, maybe not, because we're going to have that final say, and he's making it very clean in terms of conflict of interest. I think it's going to work well, and we'll see them all before the
Yeah.
checks are ever cut.
Yeah,
All righty. One of the disadvantages of being up here is you get to ask the questions last, and I want to thank Counselor Erickson for asking a few of my questions regarding the application and who gets to review that, because it's important that we know that also. I've heard comments that workforce development is one of our top priorities. I think it is our top priority as a community going forward. The city, our business community, our education community. As we grow as a city, we are expanding well beyond what we started with, where we were 20 years ago, and we're just going to have to keep looking forward. You know, recently I saw, you know, the biosciences, the biomedical, and how everything going on within that area. With the word of caution, though, we approved this $500,000, and I was proud to, and happy to vote for it. Thank you for bringing that, Counselor Erpenbach. When you look at these presentations, people have to understand that this, in all likelihood, will not be an ongoing $500,000. So I hope that you strongly consider that when you decide who or how you're going to allocate this money. I would like to think the city can always be involved in workforce development, and I think that we had to pour some gas on the fire a little bit to get things going, and I'm happy that we're doing that. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And thank you. Any other questions? All righty. Thank you very much, Darren.
thank you.
Counselor Anderson, would you make a motion for us?
Motion to propose executive session, consult with legal counsel about proposed or pending litigation or contractual matters pertinent to SDCL 1-25-2.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn to executive session for pending litigation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion